Shirou was walking in the hallway, minding his own business. As he did, it was then that he heard a voice coming from behind. Emiya Shirou-sama. Shirou nearly flinched at what the voice just called him. What the heck? Did that voice just call me Emiya Shirou-sama? Shirou then turned to see the person of the voice. As he did, he saw a woman who had blonde hair and twin tails, a two-tone leotard that covered half of her body, boots that go up to half of her legs, and elbow gloves that covered most of her arms. That girl was Bradamanti, one of the 12 paladins of Charlemagne. Soon, Bradamanti got up close to where Shirou was and introduced herself to him. Emiya Shirou-sama. It's a pleasure to meet you, she said nervously. Why yeah. And who are you? My name is Bradamanti. One of the 12 paladins of Charlemagne. I see. Nice to meet you too, Bradamanti. What business do you have with me? Well. I want to know more about you. Especially after from what I heard from Merlin-sama. Shirou let out a small sigh. What did Merlin tell you about me? Well, Bradamanti thought as she began to recall an event that happened earlier. Bradamanti was walking down the hallway happily, minding her own business. As she did, she then passed by Merlin, who was in front of her. Upon seeing him, Bradamanti let out a smile and headed towards him. Merlin-sama, she exclaimed excitedly. HM? Oh, hey there Bradamanti. How are you doing? Merlin asked with a smile on his face. I'm doing fine, Merlin-sama. How about you? Well, things have been crazy actually ever since Valentine's Day. Even by my standards, I still can't believe it. Believe what exactly? Merlin let out a small chuckle and a laugh. I still can't believe that my student and her counterparts actually got sent to medical center just because they saw their queen shirtless and wet at the same time. Upon hearing Merlin's words, Bradamanti was surprised and confused at the same time. The King of Knights and her counterparts has a queen? Yeah. Remember the servant known as Emiya Shirou? HM? Oh yeah. He's the servant that can cook well, beat the King of Heroes, possesses a noble phantasm that surpasses the King of Heroes' noble phantasm, and killed an evil interdimensional space god that can control the Asakshik records from another universe. Practically everybody knows him. Exactly. So what does Emiya Shirou have any to do with the situation of the King of Knights and her counterparts? Merlin let out a smug grin. Emiya Shirou is the King of Knights and her counterpart's queen. Bradamanti's mouth dropped. Emiya Shirou is King of Knights and her counterpart's queen? Yes, which makes him Mordred's mother in this case. Bradamanti was shocked with the news she just received. How did this happen? And since when? Well, ask Emiya Shirou for the answers you need. After all, he's the one that knows the details the best. For a short moment, Bradamanti was silent before continuing the conversation. Got it. Where can find Emiya Shirou-sama though? Merlin was surprised for a moment before he let out a snicker. Emiya Shirou-sama? Bradamanti nodded. Yeah. I mean, he's the King of Knights and her counterpart's queen along with being Mordred's mother, so it's proper manners to call him that. Is there something wrong with that? And no. Merlin muttered as he turned around to hide the snickering from Bradamanti. Emiya Shirou-sama, that's hilarious. And I thought Queen Shirou was funny, but this is new. Can't wait to see how he reacts to this title by Bradamanti. Merlin then turned around to see Bradamanti. Anyway, if you wish to find him, he should be in one of the hallways or the kitchen. I would recommend the kitchen first, because he usually does his job over there. I see. Thank you Merlin-sama. No problem. Soon, Bradamanti left Merlin's sight and went to find Shirou. As she did, Merlin let out a chuckle as he imagined the results. Well then Shirou, how will you react upon meeting Bradamanti? I can't wait to see the results. Back to the present. And that's how it all began, Bradamanti said. Shirou let out a small sigh. So, let me get this straight. You were curious about me, because Merlin mentioned me after the accident on Valentine's Day. And you wanted to know about me a bit more after hearing about me being Arturia's and her counterpart's queen? Exactly, Emiya Shirou-sama. Shirou sighed again. Okay, I got the geist of things. So, you just want to know me a bit more, Bradamanti? Bradamanti nodded in reply. Alright then. Let's move to the cafeteria, then to discuss things. Right here isn't a good time for a conversation. Is that okay with you? Bradamanti's eyes lit up. Yes. Well, follow me then. Yes. Emiya Shirou-sama. Shirou sighed again. Just call me Shirou, Bradamanti. You don't have to call me that. But you're royalty though. You're a part of the British royal family. Therefore, it's proper manners to call you by that. Bradamanti argued. Shirou and Bradamanti then walked down the hallway. As they did, Bradamanti constantly asked Shirou questions about his lifestyle, his noble phantasm, and many more. For once, Shirou felt overwhelmed from answering Bradamanti's questions. Merlin was walking in the hallway, minding his own business. As he did, he passed by the cafeteria and saw a sight that interested him ever since he told Bradamanti about Shirou. Which was Shirou and Bradamanti having a conversation together. Eh? The King of Heroes did that? Yeah. Well then. That sounds like a cowardly thing for him to do. Attacking you two while on a date, that makes my blood boil. Bradamanti yelled as she ate her food. Merlin let out a chuckle upon seeing the scene in front of him. Well then, things have gotten interesting between those two, I should check it out now. Merlin then entered the cafeteria and upon arriving, he caught the attention of both Shirou and Bradamanti. Ah. Merlin-sama. Hey there Merlin. Merlin let out a smile. Nice to meet you too, Bradamanti, Shirou. I take it that you two already met earlier? Yeah. I met Emiya Shirou-sama for a conversation about himself, and he led me to the cafeteria so we can talk better. I see. And did you introduce yourself to Shirou properly, Bradamanti? Merlin asked. Yes. Merlin-sama. For a moment, Shirou was a little dumbfounded at what Bradamanti just said to Merlin. Merlin-sama? Really? Then, he stared at Merlin for a moment. What? Merlin asked. Shirou then got closer to Merlin and whispered to him. Did Bradamanti actually call you Merlin-sama? Merlin let out a chuckle. Well, I did help her out once when I was trapped in Avalon, so she puts me on high regards, he whispered back. I see. What are you two talking about? Bradamanti interrupted. HM? Ah, nothing, Merlin replied as he turned back to look at Bradamanti. Anyways, what do you think of Shirou so far? Bradamanti's eyes lit up in excitement. He's just as everything as I imagined. He's amazing, strong, nice, and do anything here. Guess the rumors about him were true. Especially the part about him being a great cook, she explained excitedly. Shirou let out a sigh. Just what kind of rumors about me have been swirling around in Chaldea? Actually, I do not want to know. As expected from Chaldea's strongest heroic spirit. Shirou let out a chuckle. Well, that's not true, Bradamanti. Eh? But why? You possess two noble phantasms in which one of them is a counter against the King of Heroes' greatest treasures. If anything, that's pretty much a guarantee that you're the strongest servant. Bradamanti argued. Well, here's the thing, Bradamanti. Everyone has their own unique strengths and weaknesses that makes them who they are. There's no such thing as the strongest or the weakest. It all depends on the person itself. That's what I believe in. Bradamanti was amazed with what Shirou just said. If that's the case, then what do you think of yourself as Emiya Shirou-sama? Well, for me, I consider myself in both strong and weak. There are things that I am good at, and yet, at the same time, there are things I am not good at. I see. One question, were you born with the power you have now? Shirou chuckled again. Not quite. The result you see right before you are the result of my travels. And plus, during my life, I was a third-rate magus that didn't know the basics of magecraft. I was only able to do projection and reinforcement. Really? Yeah. Even now, I consider myself the same as before. I see. I hate to interrupt you too, but what were you talking about earlier? Merlin asked. Emiya Shirou-sama was talking about how he and the King of Knights met each other, and I was amazed with the story he was telling me. However, I can't believe how vile the King of Heroes was acting in that war over there. He sounds like a greedy, arrogant brute. Bradamanti replied. Merlin let out a chuckle upon hearing Bradamanti's words. That is true, Bradamanti. Anyways, can you continue the story, Emiya Shirou-sama? Yeah. Anyways, after the King of Heroes attacked both me and Arturia, I ended up summoning Avalon from me to protect myself and Arturia from Gilgamesh's attack. It worked, and he left. Bradamanti listened to the story in interest. Go on. After that, me and Arturia went up against Gilgamesh and his master, beat them, and destroyed the Grail in the end. Eh? You destroyed the Grail? But why? Well, the Grail was already corrupted by then because of prior events. If anything, the Grail would have ended up destroying the world if a wish was used, so we destroyed it for good measure. Bradamanti was amazed with what Shirou and Arturia did. Wow, so what did you do after you and the King of Knights were separated? Afterwards, I went on a journey to find her again. In the process, I ended up meeting my ancestor in spirit form along with gaining his noble phantasm, fought against many enemies, and ended up killing an evil interdimensional space god that can control the Akashic records from another universe. And that's the end of my story. Wow, so you went through all of that during your time as a human before and after meeting the King of Knights, and accomplishing all of that, that's amazing. Bradamanti said in wonder. Indeed, Merlin said with a smile on his face. And to think that you did all of that on your own, impressive. Yeah. Shirou said as memories of his past came back to his mind. All of those memories, those fights, my encounters and actions, they will always stay with me. Oh yeah, that reminds me of something. How did you become Queen Shirou to begin with? Shirou then pointed to Merlin. Ask him. Bradamanti then turned to Merlin. Merlin-sama? Merlin let out a chuckle. To be fair, Shirou, Mordred came up with the idea after she and the rest of the knights met you. Yeah. But you're the one who spilled the beans about me first, Shirou argued. True. Eh? So, Merlin-sama started the whole thing? Well, in a way, I guess. But Mordred started the whole thing after all the knights found out about the relationship between you and Arturia and her counterparts, Merlin jokingly said. You can say that again. Shirou muttered. Merlin chuckled. Anyways, you finally got your answer, Bradamanti? Bradamanti let out a smile. Yup. I finally now know who Emiya Shirou-sama is, his relationship with the King of Knights and her counterparts, and how wonderful he is. Thank you, Merlin-sama. Merlin smiled. You're welcome, Bradamanti. Before I leave, can I have an autograph from you, Emiya Shirou-sama? Bradamanti said as she pulled out a book out of nowhere. Shirou then looked at Merlin, who already had a pen in his hands. He mentally sighed before continuing. "Sure," he said as he grabbed the piece of pen from Merlin. Afterwards, he then began to sign the book Bradamanti gave him. "Here you go." "Great. Anyways, by Emiya Shirou-sama. By Merlin-sama." Bradamanti said happily as she grabbed the signed book. "By Bradamanti," Shirou and Merlin said in unison. And Bradamanti left, leaving Merlin and Shirou alone. For a moment, nobody didn't say anything. "So, Emiya Shirou-sama?" Merlin teased. Shirou let out a small groan. "Not another word, Merlin,"